Well, good morning, everyone, or should I say you all? That's what we say in North Carolina. It's Friday morning, so it's time for our weekly prayer partners update for you from Christ the King Lutheran Church here in Cary. I'm Pastor Wolfgang, and I have to tell you today, my heart is quite troubled and quite heavy with everything that's going on in our world. And yet, at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of signs of hope. And I want to tell you about two of those in just a minute. But first, I want to say, we are still in the midst of this pandemic. COVID-19 is not going away, at least in our states. The numbers are still going up. More people are getting sick, and more people are dying. In North Carolina, we are closing in now on 1,000 people having been killed by this killer virus. And so we're still dealing with the fallout of all of that. There's still restrictions in place. We are still not able to gather in our own church buildings. We are not supposed to leave the house unless we have to. Restaurants are at 50% capacity. I mean, all kinds of things that we're still dealing with. And then in the midst of all of that, as though that wasn't troubling and challenging enough, George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. Monday a week ago, the police officer was kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I mean, that's not, you can't even conceive of that. And then, of course, we had the uprisings after that and the revolts and the protests in many, many cities across the country, including in Raleigh, our own city right next door here. And some of that, of course, turned violent and ended up in rioting and looting, which is also very troubling. That's a very complicated issue, and it's very easy to blame the peaceful protesters for turning violent, but it is also true that in many of those cases, extreme right-wing groups and perhaps some left extremist groups as well kind of took advantage of the situation and came in late at night and turned these peaceful protests into riots. And that is disturbing all by itself, right? And so just a challenging week where you're not really sure what to think and what to do, and you feel kind of powerless, and you feel like finally the issue of systemic and institutionalized racism and discrimination is coming to a head. But that kind of gives you hope too. Maybe this is a turning point when we are finally taking that seriously after so many people of color have been killed and have suffered under the current system. And so I want to tell you about two pieces of hope. One that happened last week. Ella Green, who is a high school student, just graduated from Cary High School next door to us. And of course, that was a heartache too, because seniors couldn't graduate the way they wanted to. Nobody got to walk across the stage because of the coronavirus. And so she graduated from Cary High School just recently. She grew up at Christ the King, and she wanted to express how she was feeling. She wanted to do something to make a difference. And so she and her friend Michael had this idea of using art to express their feelings. And they went to the Cary Fountain. That's a very nice little park with an actual fountain in the middle in downtown Cary. And they drew with chalk on the sidewalks things like, at Black Lives Matter and in memory of George and so on. Now, the remarkable thing, I mean, this would be remarkable enough. They did a great job with the artwork. But the very remarkable thing is that the day before, they called the Cary Police Department. They wanted the police to know what they were up to, just so that there wouldn't be any misunderstandings about what they were doing. That was very smart. And the police said, "Oh, that's a great idea. Can we help?" And before you knew it, there were police officers out there, including the chief, and they were helping to do some of this artwork and to draw on the sidewalk. And then the fire department came out after a while to help them hose down the street and clean off the art. And I mean, that it was just such a way of people coming together. And Ella and Michael did such a good job of making them come together and together making a statement for the whole community to see. I think it's a wonderful example of how one individual, one person can make a difference because she was living out her discipleship. She was living out what she understood Jesus wanted her to do, to bring peace and justice to a challenging situation. The second example I want to tell you about, that's a sign of hope for me. Well, it hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen tomorrow, Saturday. Christ the King is part of an organization called Cary Area Ministerial Alliance. And the churches in that alliance, Catholic, Methodist, Presbyterian, Lutheran, and so on, the churches in that alliance have decided to come together on Saturday, June 6th, and to invite their members to come to each of their individual churches and stand in a line on the front lawn at 3:30 with signs and posters protesting the killing and also recommitting to dismantling institutionalized racism in society and in the church itself. So in our case at Christ the King, we're going to be starting together at 3:15 Saturday afternoon. We're going to stand around the perimeter of our church, starting on Tanglewood Drive and then around the corner and down Walnut Street. So we do need quite a few people. We are going to keep 6 feet distance from each other. We're going to be wearing masks and we're going to be holding our signs. And we'll do that at 3:30 for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in honor and in memory of George Floyd. And then once that is over, people are invited to caravan to Raleigh. There is going to be a prayer walk that is sponsored by the Raleigh Ministerial Alliance, Interfaith Ministerial Alliance, and that will be starting at the Duke Energy Center at 4:30. That's when we gather, 4:30, and then 5 o'clock the walk starts. It will lead downtown, and there'll be a rally in the end downtown. So we're going to join that as well. I am hopeful that when people of faith come together, particularly people from various faiths, whether that's different Christian denominations or whether that's an interfaith group with Muslims and Buddhists and Jewish people and Christians and Baha'i and so on, when we come together as people of faith, we have a voice. We saw that again this past week, when our president went to an Episcopal church and held up the Bible and held it upside down at that. You can think about that whatever you want. I think the response of the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, D.C. was absolutely marvelous. She was so able to explain what the Bible has to say to us, right? And what faith has to say to us when it comes to justice and peace and to treating people equally. It was a wonderful example of what people of faith can bring to this troubling and challenging situation. And so I'm hopeful. And I would invite you to pray with me that God would give us wisdom and discernment and strength so that we could address all of these many problems that are right in front of us. Maybe this is finally a trigger point. Maybe this is a tipping point where the long fight against racism and discrimination and against white supremacy finally takes a turn to the better. I certainly hope so, and I pray so, and invite you to pray with me. God bless you always. Take good care of yourself.